Peace. It's Brother Tariq back with the A1 podcast. I'm sorry for taking so long to get my next episode out, but you got to do some research before you go ahead and just hop in and put information out. You know what I mean? It got to be able to be. You have to be able to have your information and your facts together so that people can go ahead and research on their own. You know what I'm saying? Because the whole point of this platform is for us to get better as a people, right? So again, it's always peace, blessings to you, and the universe. We're hoping that we can find some of the answers that we're searching for as people, as a group of indigenous people in the African diaspora, right? And as we live here in this wilderness that we call North America, we have to go over some things that are common, misconceptions are things that we tend to take for granted, right? And so if you've been with me from the beginning, you know that my first show, I kind of set the whole premise for the stage of this podcast, right? For what we're going to talk about, what we're going to continue to build on, right? So that was the foundation. So I also want to go ahead and go back into the fact that to build off my first episode, the concept of know thyself, which is an African proverb, right? This is a very well-known proverb for those who are into that kind of Kemetic science, right? And I think it's one that's very important for most of us to get to know, because if we don't know ourselves, then we don't know anything, right? And if you don't know yourself, you're easily led astray, which is the topic of today's discussion, right? So when we talk about knowing ourselves, right, we're talking about us as a people, right, the indigenous people of this wilderness of North America, right? We have to get to the point to start dealing with some facts versus myths, right? There's a myth that most of my people still believe, that most of us were brought here on slave ships, right? And so I did some research just to check, right, to see what's going on, right? And if you've been keeping up with me, right, and following along with me, right, you know that there's this guy. I did an episode called Gatekeepers, right, where there's people who are in higher positions, right, placed there to act as barriers for us as a whole, right? So the common misconception is that most of us came to North America, i.e. the United States, right, through the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, right? So I Googled it, right? The Root, which is supposed to be a black publication, right, which is not. It's actually owned by like a white guy and ran by some homosexuals, but that's another story. You know what I'm saying? But the Root has an article written by Henry Louis Gates Jr. The name sounds familiar, it should, because he's the guy from Harvard who got the gun pulled on him by the cop and went to the White House and drunk a beer with Obama and did the fist bump, but I digress, right? The whole point is he's supposed to be a history expert, especially our history, African American studies type of expert, right? And so what he did was write an article about how the 10 to 12.5 million Africans were enslaved and brought over from the Ivory Coast over here into America, right? And so I'm reading some more, I'm reading the History Channel, right? The History Channel says it's between 6 and 7 million, right? Well, that's still different from 10 to 12 and a half, right? So the more I'm reading, I'm finding other articles that he's written and talking about 10 to 12.5 million, right? But then when you get down to it, right, and I want you to look this up for yourself, there's something where you can Google it, the separated American slavery, separating fact from myth. Well, the myth is that it was millions of us brought here on a transatlantic voyage to North America, right? Even though we know a lot of us went to the Caribbean and South America, but they're talking about here to North America. right? When you research the actual number, it was only a little over 300,000 that made it here to North America, right? Or United States. So then you get to the point, well, how did it get to be approximately 4 million of us that were freed after the Civil War? See what I'm saying? 300,000 to 4 million. It was more than that because a lot of us were already here. You feel what I'm saying? And when you get to dealing with your families, right, and your family trees and your legacy, and you look back, and a lot of people in your family say, yeah, we got Blackfoot Indian in us, we got Creek Indian in us, we got Cherokee, you know what I'm saying, Sioux, whatever, right? It's kind of laughed at, right? It's kind of laughed at in our community, but the reality is there's a lot of truth to that because a lot of us was already here before, before the colonizers came, right? And then, if you don't even believe that, you can go ahead and look at speeches from Martin Luther King. He said we were here before Jim Crow and segregation and all that other stuff. He said we were already here. Then of course he starts asking for reparations and he gets one. He gets shot, right? Then you look at one of my favorites, Malcolm X. He always said we didn't land on Plymouth Rock, Plymouth Rock landed on us. Why? Because he also said that we were always here, right? So, when you don't know yourself and deal with your own history, you easily led astray. See what I'm saying? Where they got most of us thinking that Kemet, aka Egypt today, was ran by a whole bunch of light-skinned Arabs. They came into Africa to civilize us when we already know that the Nubian dynasty ruled Kemet for many years. You feel what I'm saying? Or that the term Moor comes from those of North Africa, meaning those darkened skin, pigment. You know what I'm saying? But if you don't do the knowledge to this and you sit around and just take what they give you, the information they give you, you understand what I'm saying? It'll be easily become almost like a fact to most people because nobody's doing the research to contradict what they're talking about, right? So then you go ahead and you get to if you think about it, even right now, in parts of Texas, they took out slavery out of the books, right? It's called, they calling them indentured servants, right? Crazy, you know what I'm saying? Crazy. To be honest, when you look at the transatlantic slave trade, right, when it came to North America, i.e. the United States, right, it was more European slaves brought here than there were African slaves. You know what I mean? And that's just a fun fact. So you look that up, you know what I'm saying? So then we get to the point where we talking about, well, how many of us are from that bloodline back in the day, right? So you Google it, it says it's approximately just under 48 million of us, right, in this wilderness. So then you take about 10% off for the people that came after slavery and from the West Indies and Africa and other places, right, that were not actually tied to this land, right? It's about 43 million of us that's just here. Where the fuck did everybody come from? You feel me? And that's just something for you to think about, right? And you know what I'm saying? That's a part of us losing our way, trying to assimilate into a system that does not want us. See, that's another thing. A lot of us keep forgetting that the system is not designed for you. You keep fighting for a dream that was never meant for you. Every time you deal with the words and their laws, they look at you as less than or half a person. You know what I'm saying? Like you're not even a full person. But you still want to be a part of that society, right? Instead of creating your own, recreating Black Wall Street and being your own. Like we was always able to be great. We just gotta wake up and remember